the 1996 Superstock Magazine reunion, featuring nothing but the most area of drag racing. Whether it's altered wheelbase, funny cars in side-by-side competition, or the original Superstockers that started the drag racing sedan revolution, they're here. And now, so are you, at the Superstock Magazine reunion. You know, this race is full of some of the most historic drag racing vehicles ever created. Here's a classic example with Dick Estevez in the Daddy Warbucks Falcon restoration and the legendary Arnie the Farmer Bestwick in his brand new GTO. That's not the Tiger Tempest that's shutting off early after getting sideways. Estevez was one of the most popular racers at this event, clicking off some amazing runs in this awesome short wheelbase Ford that indeed became a legend in the original factory experimental wars. But here at the Superstock reunion, Superstock is the name of the game. Let's face it, it was the Detroit production machines that were created with some of the highest horsepower combinations of all time that turned the nation's attention to the sport of drag racing. And virtually every single combination was represented here during this incredible event. Whether it was the original Max Wedge or HEMI Chryslers, or the variety of Ford high-performance machines, from the original Fairlanes to the incredible Thunderbolts, everything was here, and it gave you that kind of drag racing. Almost wheel-to-wheel the quarter mile in a full day of competition. The thousands of fans who made the trek to Dinwiddie, Virginia, got a chance to see real competition with real race cars. When it's this close, it's not just for kick. John Lundberg had a chance to look at one of these prized possessions earlier.
What Ford did after the Thunderbolt was a very, very few, extremely exotic, very difficult to drive, immensely powerful Ford Falcons. And this particular vehicle I'm standing in front of now is probably the most faithfully restored vehicle representing that era, and it was restored by this man, Dick Estevez. Dick, it's a pleasure to have you with us this afternoon. Now, what we're going to do is, this is not a 90-second, we're going to bench race, okay? Tell me how you found the car.
Well, I found the car. It was taken back to Detroit to be crushed, and a guy that knew Bonner and knew the car well, he managed to get it out of the crusher back in '65, at the end of '65. And he took the car and restored it semi and kept it for a couple years hidden and, you know, out of sight, and then brought the car back out. But it was a handful to drive. He had changed the front suspension on it and whatnot, and this car, you better know what you're doing when you're going down the racetrack in it.
Well, yeah, when you have a 427 side oiler in a high, stiff car, that would seem to be something rather exciting to drive. Can you possibly recall for us some of the adventures that Phil Bonner must have had in this car?
Oh, Phil, he had lots, but Phil was a showman, and he had nerves of steel. And Phil, he just toured the country with this car, and it was his baby.
I guess it was. Now, you have made, Dick, several improvements to the vehicle that are obvious as we look at the side of it, but may not be so obvious since we're not going to look totally underneath the automobile. Now, and I think we can make with this car kind of that whole transition from the old unlimited 7-liter AFX Pro Stock car of the 1960s to a thoroughly modern 4-link drag racing vehicle that is quite comfortable and quite a good straight line performer.
Yes, this car we incorporated. We put a complete tube chassis in the car, and you got much better tires today than what we had then, and the suspension, the McPherson strut type front suspension on it. These cars really now are a pleasure to drive. Before, driving down the racetrack, you had to drive it the entire racetrack. Today you can just sit in it. Your timing's important, but you can just sit there and click the gears and go through. It's smooth as silk. It's hard to believe that you can go so much faster, and yet at the same time it's easier than it used to be.
What Ford needed to do in 1965 was to take their Superstock AFX program to a next step of development. What they gave us was this car right here, the 427 FE side oiler car, and it was a handful to drive. They had very unique and very special people to drive it. In this case, Phil Daddy Warbucks Bonner. What Dick Estevez has done is restored the look of that car for this generation. What he has also done from a safety and performance standpoint is to make it a performance car of this generation. In 1965 and 31 years later in 1996, drag racing is better for what Dick Estevez has created for us here today.
One of the most amazing aspects of this event is indeed the attendance of John Lundberg. Having the man who lived this drag racing history, let alone announce the competition of the cars in its original form, is probably one of the single biggest benefits for both the racers and the fans here at Virginia Motorsports Park. And I might add that while John Lundberg, the original voice of drag racing, has done more to help this event than anybody else, he is capably assisted at this race by Ralph Hamilton, the other announcer who chronicled drag racing's most glorious age with machines like this. In fact, it doesn't matter what kind of vehicle you're talking about. Some of the best known variations of those cars were in attendance at the Superstock reunion again. Whether you're talking about a variety of restored Soxon Martin Chryslers or some of the best known original Chevrolets from drag racing's most glorious age, they were all here and all running in full out competition. Now, one thing's for sure, a lot of the younger fans got a chance to see machines that they never could have been able to see right here at this event. A classic example, the cars that changed drag racing forever. The original altered wheelbase factory-produced machines that started the funny car revolution. The classic example in the far lane, the original Paul Candies and Leonard Hughes Jake Speed Shop 65 Plymouth Belvedere, a car that held the world elapsed time record at the end of 1965 and the 8.6 second zone. Now, these altered wheelbase fuel-injected nitro burners still launch like they used to. Wheels up and out of shape, as those incredibly short Musters were a handful then and a handful now. But John Lundberg earlier found a car that would change the face of this sport for all time. The original fuel funny car.
You're looking at a car built with a single purpose in mind, on a limited budget to pursue a drag racing show put on by Dodge Division of Chrysler Corporation and embarrass it. In 1964, Dodge Division of Chrysler launched a side-by-side racing show with two vehicles involved called the Dodge Chargers. They were supercharged, alcohol-burning super stockers that raced side-by-side in a demonstration exhibit. Lincoln Mercury had little or no funds for its drag racing budget, so Fran Hernandez contacted veteran drag racer Jack Chrisman and said, if we put a HEMI Camaro in a Comet, put a blower in it, put nitromethane on it, put the motor at the right place in the chassis, you should be able to run quicker and faster than the Dodge Chargers. Here's what I want you to do. I want you to build a car, and I want you to do nothing for a year but pursue those guys and embarrass them. He did that. This car also made demonstration runs at many major drag racing events and is quite often pictured to be the predecessor of the modern funny car as we know it today. Like many cars here at the Superstock reunion, this car was gotten out of a great state of decay and restored to very much of its original glory by this young gentleman right here. His name is Jim Barillero. Jim, tell us the story of how you found the vehicle.
In 1982, a fellow racer from Oklahoma contacted me, and he said that there was a Comet in Alberta, Canada, that had remnants of being an AFX car. But the motor was set underneath the cowl, and they weren't really sure what it was. And I stopped to think it might have been Jack's old car, because Jack was a good friend of mine, and I saw this car run at the '65 Winter Nationals, and it was the most impressive thing I can remember in my early years. So I contacted the guy in Alberta. He sent me pictures, and yes, it was Jack's car. So I bought the car, went to Alberta, Canada, and brought it back and restored it in 1983. This car is the world's first fuel funny car. It also is the first funny car to ever be restored, which is kind of unique.
It has had a unique history, was driven by a unique guy, and has a unique future. Jim Barillero of Connecticut found one of the most storied cars in the sport. And by the way, for those of you who are interested in the finish of real things, this is the car's original paint job laid on this body 31 years ago.
In July of 1968, the original 426 twin 4-barrel HEMI-powered 68 Barracuda with a 4-speed transmission. this one the first ever in the 8-second zone. It's Bullet Bob Reed of Salisbury, North Carolina. Even in the heat of this event, 9.01 seconds at over 150 miles per hour. And that car still holds the NHRA Superstock A world record. In the Nostalgia Superstock final round in the near lane, Jim Amos in George Weiler's original C factory experimental 64-289 Comet leaves the line about 0.3 of a second early. And that hands the win to another great one, Ohio's Paul Suloff in the original Jack Wurst Mr. 5 and 50 426 Max Wedge Plymouth, taking the win running in the 10-second zone. Frank Spittle managed to assemble a tremendous contingent of nostalgia superstockers based on current National Muscle Car Association rules. But virtually every machine in both the automatic and this manually shifted class was a crowd favorite, including the original 409-62 Chevy Bubble Top of Daytona Beach, Florida's own Daytona Dave, leaving the line a winner, as in the near lane, Dennis Kalaji from Michigan red-lighted in an original 64 Ford Thunderbolt. The 427 left the line a mere 25 thousandths of a second early. One of the tragedies of modern drag racing technology are the electronics on the starting line that let us know just how bad we screwed up. Then came the final round of the 10.9 second category, which was Mopar and Chevrolet all the way. Ricky Akers out of Chesapeake, Virginia is driving the 71 Plymouth Duster with a 440 wedge. He's one of the best-known bracket racers of modern drag racing. Tommy Gulla's New York Camaro right alongside him hits the brakes, and we've got the closest finish of this event. A tremendous drag race that saw Akers Mopar take the win 10.98 to a losing 11.04, but watch the finish. The Camaro driver hits the brakes to avoid going under 10.90 seconds and 15 thousandths of a second true win margin. That left us with the 11.9 second heads-up category, and it was an Oldsmobile and Chevrolet match. The classic 56 Chevy station wagon of Tom Ball against Jim Day's original 4,500-pound 67 Olds 442. How many people even remember what 442 stood for? Well, it stands for winner in this particular drag race. By the way, the answer to the trivia question, 4-barrel carburetor, 4-speed transmission, and dual exhaust.
In December of 1969, Chevrolet division of General Motors Corporation was finally able to construct what they believed at that point was the ultimate Camaro. And that was a Camaro with a 427 Z11 engine combination in it. The two cars were built on New Year's week, arrived at Fred Gibbs Chevrolet on New Year's Eve, and on New Year's Day, Dickie Harrow, a prominent superstock racer of the time, traveled from St. Louis, Missouri to Chicago, Illinois, and picked up this car, this very same car to the last bolt, the first ZL1 Camaro. And I'd like to spend a couple of minutes talking with a guy that rescued the car and has totally refurbished it in its original glory from the ground up, the future systems and technology engineer for Oldsmobile division of General Motors, Bill Porterfield. Bill, how did you find the car?
Well, it was for sale in the National Dragster in about 1986. And I couldn't afford the car, even though I knew it was a deep deal. The owner didn't know which ZL1 it was. I knew, and I just tracked it to the second owner, and 2 years later I was able to force it away from him.
You have invested a significant amount of time, effort, and dollars in creating this car to its current state of repair. Tell us some of the details about what that involved.
Well, the deal is that Fred Gibb and Dick Harrell raced this car as an AHRA Superstock Eliminator car, which was the predecessor to Pro Stock. It's a very unusual configuration for the time. Fiberglass parts, 2 4-barrels, tunnel ram, parachute, no front brakes. A real unique class. In '71, they updated the car and ran it as an AHRA Pro Stocker. And with Jim Hayter driving this car, won the World Championship in Pro Stock in '71. Then it went through about 5 different bracket racers, and they all had to add their little bit of magic and mystique to it and basically really butched it up. I found the car. I knew from the VIN number that it was the #1 car because I've got a lot of the documents from General Motors. I took the car over to Fred Gibbs' place in La Harpe, Illinois, and he looked around it and got the original driver down. And they looked it over, and a few tears in their eyes, and I knew I had it then. And Gib asked me to pull the door panel off the right side, and there's a big metal patch in there, and they broke an axle shaft, and the axle came through that door one time. So that kind of clinched it for Gib. Found a lot of unique things about the car that the Harrow crew did that weren't exactly tidy. They built this car in 3 weeks' time to get it to the AHRA Winter Nationals in Phoenix. So the first build on it was a little crude, and then the bracket guys didn't really help that. So I was determined not to rebody the car. All new floors, all new trunk flooring, all new interior. I had to replace the glass front end, all new glass, but the body itself, the cowl, the firewall, the VIN tags, that stuff is all, this is an original car.
Bill, that's incredible. Now, you've been out here at the track today running in the 950s and in the 140-mile-per-hour range. Who builds the modern engine for the car?
Well, when I brought the car up myself, I had a 427 motor in it, and I was trying to get the car to run 990s with a 9, just make it comfortable and easy. And I was struggling in the 1020s running the car by myself, and I hooked up with Batten Performance in Romulus, Michigan. And Cyril Batten had built the ZL1 engines for Jim Head's top fuel car when Jim Head held the fuel record with a ZL1 Chevrolet back in the 76 or so. Cyril Batten built those motors, so I figured that's a good place to go. And Batten's been providing the motors, and they instantly took me from 1020s to 970 one weekend, and then 940s, and then 930s. So when everything is right, the car will run 930s at 145.
Well, those of you who are Chevy lovers in our audience may wonder where the COPO option came from, where it started. It started right here. It started on New Year's Day in 1969 when this car was delivered to one of the great drag racers of the 1960s and early 70s, Dickie Harrow. And I think we should all owe Bill Porterfield a round of thanks for restoring the very first ZL1 to its original glory, and with a Batten engine and a modern driveline, going even faster. Chevy fans, here's number one.
In the pits, crews were preparing the Gib Harrell ZL1 Camaro and the Sox and Martin HEMI Cuda for their celebrated match race. These exact same cars met in January 1969 at the AHRA Winter Nationals, with the Camaro making its drag racing debut by defeating world champion Ronnie Sox's HEMI Cuda. Today, Bill Porterfield and Dale Smith are the owners of these cars.
Well, I've had several cars, and I utilize in my business for research, and I was at the Mopar Nationals, and I walked by this car and had no idea that it would be in a price range that I could afford, so I just typical question, how much you asking? Well, their asking price was within my realm of reality, and we struck up a deal, and I sold 2 cars that I had and raised the money to buy this one outright. I think if we continue campaigning the car, we would have to update it some and put a different drivetrain in it, because this has the original 68 drivetrain in it.
Well, I had another ZL1 Camaro that I bought in 1981, and I sort of tripped over this one in 1983. It was in the for sale ads in National Dragster. And the guy wasn't asking much money for it. He didn't know what he had, but I couldn't afford it at the time, so I just swallowed hard and let it go, and I kept track of it. And in 1988, the car became available again, and I ended up paying 4 times what I could have got at $483. Car is pretty unique. It's the first out of only 69 ZL1s that they built. It had the all-aluminum 427 engine. Right now, the car is as close to its original 69 buildup as I could get it. Well, we'd raced the car for a year and a half in match races, and I was doing pretty good with the car, just having a lot of fun, and caught fire on the freeway. The trailer broke a shackle and started a fire inside the trailer, and I had 2 covers on the car, and they just burned right into the paint. The aluminum roof of the trailer melted down and shattered the glass and melted the interior. It looked pretty sad. After the car burned in July, I took it home and let it sit for about 4 months, and quite a few of the parts manufacturers coughed up their product to help with the re-restoration, and we're just finishing the car up. When the match race talk started to warm up, and I knew that it was going to be at Bartle's event here, that's the excuse I used to finally just get here. And so far, what I've seen, it looks like a really good show. We're anxious to get out on the track with the old HEMI.
The way I got back to the Pro Modified, I got to watch this stuff on TV, and had a local guy there at home that had a lot of money, liked Fords, and wanted me to build a Ford car. So the 1964 Comet was the first car I won a national meet with, so that's the reason we built the Comet. And while we were waiting on building that car, Richard Buxbaum contacted me. He had one of our old Barracudas that we had, and somebody had switched it over to a 440 automatic and all. And I took it back to the shop and redid it and put a HEMI in it and campaigned it for a year. And then it was sold, and then Dale Smith bought it and contacted me and wanted me to come up here and drive it. So I haven't driven this car in 3 years, but the last time I drove it, the car ran some 960s, 140. So it should run some high nines and around 140 mile an hour.
Meanwhile, the much-publicized match race between the Sox Martin HEMI Cuda and the Gibb Harrell ZL1 Camaro was in jeopardy. Initially, Ronnie Sox's Cuda experienced clutch problems, which took most of the day to repair. Late in the day, Bill Porterfield decided to try a run on his own. Uh-oh. Well, that's drag racing. Porterfield made an abbreviated wheel standing run that dropped him out of the weekend program with a seized motor. Ironically, soon after, Ronnie Sox had repaired the Cuda, but unfortunately had to make his only pass of the day a solo run. Sox's gigantic 6-foot wheel stand resulted in a broken oil pan and second gear shifter, but he was luckier than Porterfield and was able to make repairs and race again on Sunday. The races between the Sox Martin HEMI Cuda and the Gibb Harrell ZL1 Camaro were not to happen, but Ronnie Sox and the HEMI Cuda were still able to put on a show for the crowd on Sunday with 3 match races. The first was early in the day against Bill Stevenson and his Red Alert. Just watch these cars fly. Stevenson ran an 11:18 at 119 miles per hour. Sox ran conservatively at 132 miles per hour. Later, Ronnie faced Bill Shields and his bright red Thunderbolt. .64 at 114 miles per hour for Bill Shields, and Sox improved to a 10.2, 134 miles per hour. The final race for Sox was against Sean Simmons in a 65 Mustang AFX 427, but once again, bad luck followed Ronnie. Sox misses a gear and is never in contention. Simmons wins easily with a 10.49 at 124 miles per hour. Too bad, Ronnie, but it was great to see you out there. Hope to see you next year.